Om Jnana-timirandasya, Jnananjana Shalakaya, Chakshur Unmilitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Akanda Mandalakaram, Yena Vyaptam Characharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhur Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hey Krishna, Karuna Sindhu, Dinabandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostite. Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe, Vrindavaneshwari, Vrishabhanu Sute Devi, Pranamami Hare Priye. Apavitra Pavitruva, Sarvavastha Gatopi Va, Ya Smaret Pundirikaksham, Sa Bhayabhyantara Shuchihi. So every time we teach, we try to renew our pledge to try to keep the ego out of the picture. Just push it aside when it creeps in. Try to teach without any attachment to any result, including name and fame. And that's our work. And the more we can do that, the more then Ishvara can work through us. And the more Ishvara can, but the more we can transmit Ishvara purely, not blocked by our egos, the more Ishvara will touch the heart, both of the speaker and of the hearer. And the more Ishvara touches our heart, then the more we become attracted to bhakti, and the more our minds become pure. Because if Ishvara is in the mind, in the heart, there can be no impurity. That's what that invocation means. Apavitra pavitro va, whether you're pure or impure. Sarva vastha, in all conditions. Gato pi sa. Whatever condition one has gone into. Gataha, gato. Yasmaret, if one remembers, conditional. Viti ling. Yasmaret, if one remembers who? Pundarikaksham, the one with the lotus eyes. Who's that? Ishvara. Which Ishvara? Whatever Ishvara. Whatever lotus eyes will call your heart, my friends. They all got lotus eyes. So, which lotus eyes captures your heart? That's your Ishtadevata. Sabhayabhyantara shuchihi. So then we become pure inside and outside. So we got two I think pretty cool stories today. I just wanted to just a couple of things that came into my, a couple of you emailed, well, quite a few of you emailed. Conception, someone quoted, Ayurveda out there on the web that the living entity doesn't enter the womb till 7th month. That's not correct. All tradition accept that the living entity enters the womb at conception. But what Ayurveda says, and so this quote was not properly articulated, is that the living entity doesn't develop full consciousness until the 7th month. So full consciousness of the living entity, but the living entity enters the womb at conception. So obviously, sort of any karma inflicted on any living entity, any violence inflicted on any living entity, that's karma. But obviously, the more conscious, the more sensitive, the more that living entity experiences pain, and the more the karma, because it's quantitatively proportional. So therefore, so you can just do what you want with that. That's the position of the yoga traditions. I'm sure Buddhism would be quite the same. So 7th month, full consciousness. Now, this, I would imagine it doesn't just click into full consciousness at 7th month, but it attains full consciousness at 7th month. So I would imagine there's a progression between conception and 7th month. But that's my speculation. That's my anumana. I could follow that up, perhaps. The other thing is I think I got a couple of emails about drishti. and how I said that there's drishti just means focusing the mind. The drishti is not a term that's used in the yoga tradition. Now, one thing we need to, hopefully with these studies, we're becoming a little bit more informed consumers. And, so we don't, instead of having this generic thing called yoga, hopefully we're beginning to realize there's different kinds of yoga. There's Jnana yoga, there's, different bhakti traditions, and the Shakta traditions. So the term drishti may be analyzed and demarcated in other traditions, but it's not in the yoga tradition. I don't believe it's used by Patanjali. It's been 10 years since I wrote the sutras. I'm fairly sure, but do correct me if I'm wrong, it's not in any sutra, the term drishti. Now, does it occur in the commentaries? I wouldn't be surprised, but a big deal isn't made about it. I don't remember any schematizing of drishti. Now, it may be schematized in other traditions. I would expect that to be the case because different traditions have different interests. So the Shakta traditions are much more focused on physiology and much more interested in sort of describing, the rise of Kundalini is not mentioned at all, neither in the Bhagavatam, nor in classical yoga, nor in Vedanta, nor any of these traditions. So that's that Kundalini with rising up through the chakras. So what I'm suggesting is let's not, when things come to the West and you'll get thrown into one pot called yoga. That's fine in the 60s and 70s, but by now we should be, we should be a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more aware of differences between different traditions. That's not judgmental. It's not putting any tradition, it's not making any kind of hierarchical statements, but Kundalini, chakra, all of that, no interest at all. Although there seems to be a reference to a half chakra in Patanjali, but there's no interest in the physiology. Yoga is trying to get beyond all of that, as is the Bhagavatam, beyond any kind of subtle, and therefore subtle experiences and sensations and sort of, as Kundalini rises, which may be of interest to other traditions, is of no interest to classical yoga or of the Bhagavata traditions, which are the two traditions I work with, and Vedanta, classical Vedanta, and Sankhya. Sankhya talks about the subtle body, but no mention of chakras and Kundalini in the Sankhya, at least in the Sankhya Karikas. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. That doesn't mean that the traditions that are interested in them are wrong. It just means that there are different focuses, that's all. So those are the 2 points. For example, Buddhism has 8 dharanas. Well, Patanjali doesn't have 8 dharanas, he has 1. So there's just a different schematization, that's all. Now, Patanjali has 8 samadhis, but those samadhis are not drishtis. When the way the samadhis are described in Patanjali, they're describing that it's just kind of one penetration. But that penetration, it goes deeper and deeper into the subtle substructure of an object. So that's what Patanjali seems to be interested in the discussion of the Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Anandasmita samadhis, right? Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, other way around, Nirvichara, no, that way around. And then those 6, beg your pardon, not 8. And then, of course, Nirbija, that's 7. But the interest there is not on states of mind, but rather how that mind can penetrate deeper and deeper into the metaphysical substructure of the object of meditation. So first there's name and form, there's still awareness of name and form, and then one gets to the subtle level, but there's still temporality, and then there's no more temporality, there's no here and now, so the object of it becomes universal, and then one penetrates the universal substructure of everything, and so on and so forth, and eventually the mind becomes so sattvic, it reflects Purusha back to itself, and so forth. So different traditions will have different schemas. Remember, Patanjali comes along and says, Atta Yoga Anushasanam. He's continuing teachings, and I think of him as a systematizer, and he chose, I guess, whatever he felt was normative, whatever he felt was generic, and that's what we find in the Yoga Sutras, and that becomes the classical model. But other models piggyback on that, but they maybe sort of unpack the subtle body more, and they're more interested in physiology. We have a student with us at Rutgers now who's going to do his MA thesis, and I'm going to insist he writes a book on this. On the subtle body in Buddhism, in Tantra, in Jainism, to put it all together, a real thorough, robust study on the because different traditions are going to focus on different aspects of it. Bhakti doesn't care about any of that. Or, just fix the mind on Bhagavan. And that's it. And Bhagavan will eventually manifest in the mind. There's none of this sort of different stages of this, that, and the other. So different traditions then. So don't, what I'm saying is, don't sort of be, I think we're all now, it's been, what, a half a century since the 60s, or almost 3/4 of a century. So we're all much, so these traditions have been really around a long time. All the classical texts are there. So let's just, rather than say something like, well, yoga says this and that, or, let's contextualize what we have, where things are coming from. And if statements are made with no reference, that's not a good sign. Even though the classical commentators often quote things with no references, but back then it was just assumed that Brahmanas were honest. That was Satyam, was one of the qualities of Brahman. So therefore they would quote things and no one ever said, oh, hang on a minute, where are you, I think one good thing about our academic culture is you've got to reference everything. I think that's, because we're not so honest. That's one of the features of Kali Yuga. There's 4 legs of Dharma, and each yuga, one disappears. So there's ahimsa, there's satyam, there's cleanliness, believe it or not. So socham, and tapas. Did I say tapas? So one of them disappears in each yuga. And I can't remember the sequencing, but so 3 of them have gone by the time you get to Kali Yuga, and the only one that's supposed to be standing, so the 4 legs of the bull of Dharma, right in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, actually, and only one is left, and it's tottering, and that's Satyam. And we see, my friends, in our very life, right here, the last 5 years, we see the demise of Satyam in our political system. You can no longer be elected as a politician and respect Satyam. You won't get in. You've got to lie. So when we think about, the Kali Yuga is degenerating, that question came up the other class. Yet it seems we're advancing, right? We're living longer and so forth. What qualities are we using to judge decline or progress? If we're using those 4, austerity's gone. We're not austere at all. We even brush our teeth. We have to use an electric toothbrush. We can't even move our arm up and down. Right? Austerity, right? Austerity for us is brush the teeth with a regular toothbrush. That's tapas in the Kali Yuga. So austerity's gone. Non-violence. I mean, people ate meat in ancient India, but not, what is it McDonald's says? 100 billion? What's the figure? 100 million served? And they boast about it on the Golden Arches. What's the figure? Someone go online. 10 billion? Happy Jack, is it 10 billion, 10 million, 100 million? So therefore, ahimsa is massively declined. So, and what's the other one? Cleanliness. Well, what do you mean by cleanliness? Cosmetics is not considered to be cleanliness. So we could think about that. What does that mean, cleanliness? I mean, ancient Indians would wash with the, pure waters of the river, where they would use mud and clay and things like that.
I've got an answer for you if you like. Yeah. 50 million burgers per day, estimated at well over 300 billion burgers since the founding.
Holy smoke. That's one chain. So how about ahimsa is just, you couldn't even put it on a gradation scale. It would be like it would be practically 90 degrees, the collapse of ahimsa, if we factor that sort of thing in. So the one that's tottering is truthfulness. And there's still a little bit of that, because we still get outraged when our politicians lie. But I don't know if our kids will. Maybe our kids will be so immune to it. There's some countries, I'm not going to name them, but some country we know very well. Truthfulness is pretty much passé. It's just assumed, you have to bribe to get anything done, even just to get a document, to bribe. So, but we still get outraged when some of us, but now that's the new politics. You lie just blatantly and blindly, and just deny, and so therefore Satyam, so therefore if you look at it from those 4 qualities, non-violence, cleanliness, we'd have to think about a bit more thoroughly about, well, how is it that cleanliness has declined? Maybe, the way we contaminate it. I don't know if we could extend that into contaminating our environment, right? Our nature is no longer clean. Our water is no longer clean. Our soil is no longer clean. If we extended it that way, then we could see the massive decline in cleanliness. But in terms of personal hygiene, I guess one would argue, we take showers more than I don't know how we'd have to think about that. But certainly it's clear that ahimsa has just collapsed. It's clear, in our wars with bombs and stuff, that there's just millions killed, whereas in ancient warfare, it was a battlefield. It was warrior against warrior. There were no civilians involved. Warriors were not allowed to inflict, at least in ancient India, there was no rape and pillaging. You never see any of that in any of the texts. So therefore, what to speak of violence on animals? It's clear to see how violence, so if we look at those four qualities as symptoms of the degeneration of the age, and that's what the texts say, when they say the ages have declined from Satya, Treta, and Dvarpa and Kali, they're talking about those four qualities. So non-violence, truthful. So the truthfulness is the one that's supposed to be calf left and tottering in our day and age. I think austerity is the first one to go, tapas, and then cleanliness, and then non-violence, but I may have got that order wrong, but certainly honesty. And we, my friends, have seen it now. When we were kids, the politicians, and they had some integrity. I mean, there was some sense of, you'd say something, you try to at least, but now lying is good and strategic. It's inherent in certain politicians, and political, discourse. All right, I just wanted to share some of that because that some of those. So we just following up on previous conversations. Okay, so here's our story of King Citraketu, the dead son returns. Haha. So remember, the whole Bhagavatam is spoken to Parikshit. So this is an ancient Rig-Vedic story, Vritra. So we get references in the Rig Vedas to these stories, right? Indra battling Vritra, the cosmic sea demon. But some of these stories then take flesh. That's not a good, well, why not? Take, they're fleshed out in the Puranas. So Vritra was simple and his nature was rajasic and tamasic. So how did unwavering devotion to Narayana Bhagavan arise in him? O Brahmana, remember that Shuka, the young boy sage that wanders into the assembly. So Parikshit wants, so we obviously we've missed the previous story, but don't worry. So Parikshit continues, devotion to the lotus feet of Mukunda, another name of Krishna, rarely manifests even among the celestials who are in pure sattva, or among the sages whose hearts are untainted. So it rarely manifests, many sages might be seeking the Atman. You're not necessarily seeking Bhagavan, and so they're very sattvic. So how does this bhakti arise in someone who's so rajasic and tamasic? Living entities are as innumerable as the particles of dust on the earth. Think about that, my friends. The particles of dust on the earth. Let's take a moment here. If it is true that wherever there is life, there's a living entity, that's what life is, then think about how many bacteria are there? Each blade of grass, if a blade of grass can survive on its own, it's got an Atman in it. How many blades of grass is out there outside your window? It's inconceivable. Anything that's alive can live on by itself, has an Atman. So when that text says innumerable as specks of dust, it's not being rhetorical. Right? It's impossible to determine how many. Because anyone tried to do that? Who wants to go on Wiki and type in how many living? How would you even frame the question? Because you have to include bacteria, got to include blades of grass, you're going to include all the bugs and insects, I don't know, viruses are not living, are they? But anyway, B, why don't you go on in Wiki and just find a way of, see if you can type in, what is how many living creatures are there on the planet? Living, the problem is, that might be interpreted as higher order beings, but just living things. Just put living things rather than creatures or beings. How many living things are there on the planet? It must be trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions. See what you come up with. All right. Does someone put something in the chat there?
All right. I found out that it says 8.7 million species of plants and animals in existence.
Those are species.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, this is very interesting. 8.7? Do you know what the Purana said 2,000 years ago?
8.7.
8.4 million species of life, or identical. Now, how do you explain that to me? Modern science is 8.7 million. The Puranas is about 8.4. Now have a little bit of think about that. So, but those are species. Now I'm talking about living creatures within those species.
I got a little bit more info in addition to that. So a study says 1 trillion. And so that says researchers have attempted to use the laws of math to estimate that include both micro and macro life. 1 trillion.
Okay, that's framed well. 1 trillion. So that would be what, a billion?
It would be 1,000 billion.
How many specks of dust is there on the planet? Let's just see what happens. Go ahead. How many, does anyone even bother to calculate? How many, okay, but do this. How many grains of sand on the planet? I hope you're.
We got a great answer.
What?
7.5 sextillion sand grains. So that is 75 followed by 17 zeros.
Okay, so clearly not the same. All right. Anyway, that was just a bit of fun. So, so the living entities are innumerable as the particles of dust on the earth. But keep that in mind. 8.7 million species, 84 chorasi lakh in Sanskrit. 8.7 according to science, 8.4 according to Puranas, identical to all intents and purposes. And now, how do you explain that, my friends? So living entities are innumerable as the particles of dust on the earth. From those among them who are human, right? So let's say not right now we go 8 billion. It's just hit 8 billion as I read the other day on BBC. So 8 billion, only a few strive for higher goals. How many people are, even trying to seek truth or strive for something? Notice that it's framed vaguely, higher goals. From these, for the most part, there are only a few who seek liberation, moksha, O best of the Brahmanas. And from thousands who seek liberation, only one becomes perfected and attains liberation. And even among thousands who are liberated, in this exact verse in the Gita, Manushanam Sahasresu, Kaschid yatati siddhaya, yatatammapi siddhanam, kaschid mam veti tatvataha. Out of thousands who strive, out of thousands of people, only one strives for perfection. And out of those who strive and who are liberated, barely one knows me in truth. Krishna said, it's right in the Gita. If you want the verse number, we can find it. But even among those who, notice again, back to the same point, that the bhakti to Narayana is not the same as liberation, as realization of the Atman. So from thousands who seek liberation, only one becomes perfected and attains it. Perfected means Swarupe Vastanam, Atman experience. And even among thousands who are liberated and perfected, a peaceful soul, right, already realized the Atman, who is devoted to Narayana, is very rare or best of the sages. So that's a bit of information. Now he comes back to his point. So given all this, how did the sinful Vritra, right, he's a big cosmic demon, tormentor of all the worlds, become someone with such unwavering devotion to Krishna in that terrible conflict with Indra? And that's a battle that goes back to the Rig Veda. It's a very, very old, one of the oldest narratives, probably a major narrative in the Rig Veda, referred to, and in fact, Indra is even called Vitrahan, the killer of Vritra. So it was a major ancient primordial narrative. And obviously, one can connect it with other sort of ancient stories of sea monsters and other traditions, especially Near Eastern traditions. I'm greatly puzzled by this, O Master, and eager to hear. Vritra impressed Indra of the 1,000 eyes by his valor in the battle. So Indra is covered with 1,000 eyes. And so if you see, a celestial, or if it's four heads, it's Brahma. If it's somebody carrying a vina and wearing saffron and maybe dreadlocks or top knot, that's Nārada. So you can tell everybody. So if you see a celestial up in the sky, right, he's there at the Buddha's birth, he's there at Krishna's birth, covered in eyes, that's Indra. And if you want to hear a naughty story about Indra, I'll tell you one. About his connected with his eyes, but maybe we don't want to do that. Okay, there is a bit of a racy story, and Sebastian is smiling, so he probably knows it. Okay, so Shuta replied, the great Shuka, son of Vyas, was pleased by the question of the faithful Parikshit, right? So the whole Bhagavatam then is exchange Parikshit is so sincere and he's just absorbed in this, and then questions arise in the mind, and those questions allow both the teacher and the student, well, let's not use those terms because we're all students, but allows the speaker and the hearer to both remain immersed in this beautiful bhakti stories, as well as jnana. I mean, jnana filters through it. Jnana meaning, connected to the Atman. Jnana means you're not body mind. That sort of discourse, we call it jnana. And of course, the bhakti texts are pervaded with the highest level jnana, but the Bhagavatam wants to take it to a higher place. So he was pleased by the question of the faithful Parikshit. He honored him and spoke these words. Shuka said, "Listen attentively to this narrative, O king, which I heard from the mouths of Vyas, Nārada, and also of sage Devala." So Nārada speaks the Bhagavatam to Vyas, and Vyas speaks it while Shuka's in the womb. So Shuka is Vyas's son, and I think we touched upon that before. There was once an emperor among the Shurasena people, known as Citraketu, who ruled over the earth, O king. During his reign, the earth provided all needs. So there's this idea that if everyone is following their dharmas and the varnashram is functioning smoothly and coherently, and the king is an enlightened king, like we touched upon before, then karmically the planet will provide for everyone's welfare. It's only when dharma collapses and the varnashram collapses, then people have to struggle intensely for survival. So obviously this is the ideal Vedic king. Do what you want with it. He had many wives, as kings were wont to do all over the ancient world. However, although he wanted progeny, he could not obtain any offspring from them. My friends, just give me a second. I am going to get some mint tea because my throat is dry. Be back in a second. Okay, sorry about that. Throw a log on the fire. So we go back to a story. So he could not obtain any offspring from. Now remember, the dharma, not the wish or desire or dharma of the king is to produce a son, because ancient kingship in India was patrilineal, although there were some communities in South India that were matrilineal as elsewhere in the world. But so you have to produce a son because monarchy is inherited as it wasn't everywhere else. So therefore, if you don't have a son, it means you're leaving. When you die, you're leaving. It's like the breakdown of democracy. It's like if you didn't have a president or something, it'd be exactly like that. There'd be just chaos. So think of it that way. So you have to have a son so that the dynasty continues. So consequently, anxiety. So don't just think the king wanted a son for personal reasons. No, it was his dharma, literally his dharma. So consequently, anxiety afflicted this king, even though he was endowed with all desirable qualities such as good looks, youthfulness, generosity, nobility, learning, opulence, and wealth. Neither his opulence nor all his queens with their lovely eyes, nor this earth of which he was sovereign could give the emperor any satisfaction. You don't want to die without having fulfilled your dharma. you know, people in a karma reincarnation, that sort of grow up in a karma reincarnation model, are very concerned about the next life, even if they're not interested in moksha. So once the great sage Angira, so there's these classical great sages that pop up in these stories, Nārada being one that we encountered somewhere, I think we did, who happened to be wandering around those realms. He arrived, right? So the sages we saw with Shuka, they arrive at the right time, as you know, for the story to unfold for us. Arrived unexpectedly at his palace. The king honored Angira according to custom, right? So what do you do? A great sage, great yogi comes to your home by rising to greet him and making offerings and other such things. So you offer arghya, a mouthwash, you wash the feet, you offer a nice comfortable sitting place, foodstuffs, beverage, and so forth. And then after the sage had received, remember when he got cursed, he was expecting at least some of this, even though the sage was a hermit, he was at least expecting, all he wanted was, he was thirsty, he just wanted some water. So at least he was expecting some water and he didn't get it. And because he was compromised by Rajas, well, that's how the whole Bhagavatam unfolded, if you remember from our first lesson, from our first Svadhyaya, satsang. This is called kata, actually. In the Bhakti traditions, when it's called kata, when you share the stories of Bhagavan, it's called kata. It's svadhyaya, and satsang is more a question and answer type of thing, and svadhyaya is more textual. We're doing svadhyaya. I suppose we're doing svadhyaya, something between svadhyaya and kata, but it could be both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But kata is specifically when the svadhyaya is focused on stories of Bhagavan. Then you can call it kata if you want. A cut in Sanskrit means to speak. So, and then the king sat nearby with attentive mind. You always sit below. You always sit below as a superior, a yogi, a brahman. You sit below. If you're doing puja to your deities, Happy Jack, you always sit below the deities. And if you have an altar, you put your guru has to be below any deity you have of Bhagavan. And below can just mean you put a half an inch piece of marble. Doesn't have to be below, like, it doesn't have to be 10 feet. It just acknowledge the distinction between yourself, the guru, and Ishvara. So just if you're interested in that kind of protocol, again, it's all about bhakti. It doesn't matter if you do any of that, especially in the beginning. You don't have to get all confounded and tied up in rules and regulations. But if you go down that road, you might just want to follow in the footsteps of tradition, just out of humility and gratitude and just veneration of the tradition. And then you just start tightening up little bit by little bit, and without any kind of, don't get I'm doing it wrong. None of that. Bhakti is about the heart. Always keep that in mind. But below the deity, that I think is easy enough. Okay. When the king had respectfully namaha, bowed down to the ground, right? There's a full namaskar, taken his seat, and Angira returned respect to the king, right? Great king. He then addressed the king by speaking as follows. Okay, so the king's lamenting because he doesn't have a son. Angira said, "Are you and your citizens well and in good spirits?" A little bit of chit chat. My teacher would never do this. But Angira, a little bit of chit chat. "Are you and your citizens well and in good spirits?" But even the chit chat, look how pervaded by jnana it is. This is a Gyani's idea of chit chat. Try this at the dinner table next time when you go to a social function. Look at this. How are you doing? And then say this. Just as a person is protected by the 7 evolutes of Prakriti, right? We're covered with buddhi and ahankara, and the 5-ton mantras are subtle body. So the king is protected by 7 Prakritis. Notice how the term Prakriti is used in very different ways. Again, like this thing with drishti. Used in different ways, different traditions. So how about 7 Prakritis? Yoga doesn't talk about 7 Prakritis, but Dharma Shastras do. What are the 7 Prakritis that protect the king, right? So just as the person is protected by the 7, so in Sankhya, the 7 Prakritis are, the subtle body and its various layers. What about the 7 Prakritis of the king? What are they? Statehood, kingship, ministers, allies, treasuries, fortress, army, territory. So, let's, again, let me take this moment to stress how different terms are used differently. So don't You don't need to sort of say, oh, well, yoga means this. It doesn't mean anything. It comes, it's understood differently, articulated differently, schematized differently in different traditions, often reflecting the different concerns and interests and focuses or foci of those different traditions. So here we have, who this hasn't come over to the West, has it? The 7 Prakritis of statehood, because it's from the Dharma Shastras. We don't read the Dharma Shastras in our yoga centers, but there's a whole genre of literature there has to be for kingship. Are your wives ministers of state, servants, merchant guilds? So this gives us a little bit of insight into a civic order. Merchant guilds, they had guilds. Counselors, right? A king has to have counselors because he's very Rajasic, so he needs the Brahmins, real Brahmins. Citizens, communities, regional kings, right? He's an emperor, but it's regional kings. And sons under your control. Notice that, under your control. So he's an emperor. You have to control this. And then he gets back to jnana. This is Angira's idea of chit chat. If one is in control of oneself, then all these other things come under one's control. The worlds, meaning this one and the celestial, next life celestial world, along with their rulers, all enthusiastically offer such a person tribute. Right, the celestials offer honor, and other kings offer tribute. But notice to whom? One who's in control of oneself. We respect. I think even we do, actually, respect someone who is disciplined and controlled. But so now we're done with the chit chat. The sage's idea of chit chat. But I can see that your mind is not at peace. Now he gets to the point. Whether on account of yourself or of others, your face is disturbed by worry. And so we can see if you're in anxiety or, then there's some desire. Because if you have no desires, there's no worry. You're just detached. And you just play out your karma and you serve. You do your bhakti, you serve others in whatever way you understand is in their best interest. If you have a worry, the worry is some fear, and the fear means some desire is not fulfilled, or some dvesha, some fear of something that's like death. So that usually it's a raga. So you have some desire that's not being fulfilled. Upon being confronted in this way by the sage, who actually already knew the cause, O king, right? He's just sort of opening up the conversation. He already knew, because he's a trikalig, sages know the past and the future from the present, and they have perception that is far more profound and penetrating substructures of things, including the substructure of the mind. And they can intuit, if you will, but the cause of anxiety. But one of the cities is actually to be able to read somebody else's mind. You can penetrate your mind. Can, if you're not trapped by ego, there's nothing that need contain your mind in your body. It can penetrate the minds of somebody else. I mean, we all actually do this a little bit, and we call it sixth sense. So we do it inadvertently. We can tell from a person's face, even anybody, whether you're angry, whether, so even non-yogis in tamas have some ability to do this. So the idea that the mind can somehow, in our case, we might be able to penetrate the face of somebody, but it doesn't seem like a huge stretch of possibility to consider that the psychic body of someone who's bypassed ego, because not trapped by ego, that psychic body can pervade the psychic body of somebody else and actually retrieve a samskara of whatever it is, of fear, of anxiety, and so forth. It's not, it certainly fits within the metaphysical contours of yoga psychology. So we already knew. Citraketu, desiring offspring, responded to him, bow down in humility in doing his namaha. Your Holiness, Citraketu said, the sins of yogis have been destroyed by dint of their austerities, knowledge, and samadhi insight, right? So tapas, the jnana of the Atman, and the various kinds of samadhis, ending in nibbida. So these practices destroy karma and create a sattvic mind. What is there that is not known by them about embodied beings, whether internal, external, right? Real yogis know the minds of others, is what he's saying. Nevertheless, since you've requested, O Brahman, I will disclose What is disturbing my mind? Obliged by the order of your holiness, even though you already know. Because I'm without progeny, and my possessions, majesty, and kingdom, which are so sought after by the rulers of the world, right? Because he's the emperor, do not bring me any solace to me. So if you have an overriding desire, all your other good fortune is useless, because your mind is obsessed in this one desire. I mean, I think we can all attest to that. You could be living in absolute luxury, but if some desire, whatever it is for a child in this case, you know, everything else becomes irrelevant and no longer is a source of happiness. That's the nature of the mind. So, so they don't bring any solace to me, right? My possessions, majesty, just as things unrelated to nourishment do not bring solace to those who are hungry and thirsty. He gives a nice example. If you're really, really hungry and thirsty, what is the use of your palace and your, you know, whatever, your fancy possessions and money in the bank if you're hungry and thirsty? Therefore, please protect me, O Blessed One, as I'm falling into a dark hell along with my ancestors. Okay, so here we get the idea that you have to have a son, well, to take over the kingdom, but also to do offerings to you when you die and all the ancestors. And to this day, so it's an interesting, almost a conflict between the idea of offering, you know, and Buddha actually, Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha got enlightened in the Bodh Gaya, is actually famous in Hinduism because that's the place where you go to do pitra, you go to do offer, even today, pious Hindus go there to do oblations to the forefathers. So there's a little bit of a conflict in some ways between the notion of reincarnation, where, you know, your forefathers might be in a blade of grass or a celestial realm or something, between that model and what seems to be the older Vedic model. There's no reincarnation in the old Vedas. It's more like the Indo-European, the classical Greek Latin one, where there's a realm of the ancestors. Well, no, not so much Greco-Roman, because that's you know, there are gods, and unless you're Hercules or someone, you can't actually go to the celestial realm. So let's not bring that in. But anyway, so there seems to be a bit of a interesting dissonance between the idea of offering pinda, it's called pinda, oblations, and you know, you make this sweet out of molasses and stuff, little balls, and then you offer it at Gaia, which is known Bodh Gaya now, because the Buddha's tree, supposedly the descendant of the same tree where he attained enlightenment, is right in that place. So anyway, a bit of a discordance between the idea of offering the Pitriloka, the realm of the ancestors, between that notion of a realm where the ancestors reside, and the notion of reincarnation, whereby your ancestors should have taken a birth depending on their karma, not residing in some realm of the ancestors. So, you know, historians will say there's an older Vedic culture that comes into India with its Indo-European realm of the ancestors, and that reincarnation was the indigenous culture of ancient India, and then the Indo-Aryans come in, the Indo-Europeans come in, and they settle, and they bring all the Vedic rituals, and they bring this ancestral cosmology. But meanwhile, in the yoga and reincarnation and karma and the things that mostly actually are associated with Hinduism was indigenous, and then the two eventually blend, and then eventually over the centuries, Hinduism emerges. I did my whole PhD dissertation on this, so I'm not so convinced by that at all, whether there was this external incursion. My dissertation was precisely on that many moons ago. But nonetheless, there are these points of dissonance, and for me, this is one of them. But there are ways of resolving it, you know, that you could go to a realm of ancestors and then you could, you know, get reincarnated. There are, frankly, I'm not sure I've ever seen this discussed anywhere. I haven't really, you know, I haven't really looked. I'll keep this in mind and decide if I want to investigate a bit deeper on that. But anyway, so you're supposed to do this offering to the ancestors, otherwise, I don't know, they don't get nourished, or do they fall into hell? It's not clear. Here he's suggesting they fall into, it's not, I mean, not that it's not clear, I don't know the answer to that. So point is, you got to do oblations. So instruct me, and therefore you need kids to do it for you. Instruct me as to how to overcome such a destiny by means of progeny, as otherwise such a fate is very difficult to avoid. So I was suggesting he needed a son for continuing in the kingdom, and that is the case, but that doesn't seem to be his concern here. He's more concerned about his future and the future of the ancestors. So Shuka said, beseech in this manner, Angira, the saintly and venerable son of Brahma, the original sort of engineer of the universe, being compassionate, offered rituals to Tvashta, he's the architect of the gods, including a sweet dish he had cooked for him. I don't know why he's being invoked, but there's a footnote there, and I can't remember what I wrote there. What page you were on? 397. All right, now I'm curious. Why is Tvashta being invoked? So we are aware. The practitioner. Nope, we want to go. Has anybody got the blue book? If anybody has the blue book, would you mind chasing down that reference? I don't want to hold you up. We're on chapter. We're in book 6, chapter 14. If you could go to book 6, chapter 14. Anybody with that blue book, and look up the footnote 38. And I'm sure it will say something about the builder, unless I can't, if memory serves me well. But why are they offering it to him? I don't know if that's in the footnote, but you can check. So
Trashva is a Prajapati, a progenitor.
Okay.
That's 38.
It says.
That's all.
Okay, but I'm pretty sure he's an architect. Somebody put in Tvasta, and the alternative spelling is Tvastra, and then just put in Vedic god. Who is this Vedic god? And then put in Tvasta and Tvastra. And for some reason, I want to say it's an architect, but maybe I'm wrong. He's the builder.
Well, 37.
Pardon? Doesn't matter, but now I'm just curious.
I've got something here.
Yeah.
Tvashtar is a Vedic artisan god or fashioner. He is also mentioned in the later literature of Hinduism, like the Harivamsa, sometimes identified with another deity named Vishvakarma.
Okay, so he was also an architect, a builder, a constructor. So that's how he's presented in the older text anyway. Maybe a little bit different in the later text. So the principal and eldest of the king's queens. I mean, this is Svadhyaya, my friends. You chase things down. I don't know if you find that uninteresting, but I think it's kind of all cool, right? Thumbs up, everybody, or thumbs down? We good? Yeah, occasionally chase down these little things. That's what you would do if you were studying this in traditional context. You'd be, who's that? Why is he in here? That's what Parikshit's asking. Why this? Why that? And all of it is to help us keep our minds absorbed in the Bhagavatam, which is none different from Krishna himself, according to tradition. So the principal and eldest of the queen's king was called Kritaduti, a descendant of Bharat. That's Parikshit. Remember Bharat, the king that we read the story became last week. So that this kingdom was called Bharata after him. So now all the later descendants of Bharata are descendants of Bharata. So we know the story now. So the twice-born sage, right, born and then takes the sacred thread, Brahmana, gave the remnants of the sacrifice to her. Why her? Oh, to the queen. Yeah. So we did a sacrifice to Tvashta, and he offered a sweet dish, like prashadam, right, like you do in the temple. So then once it's offered, he gives the sweet dish to the queen as prashadam of Tvashta. But this is not bhakti, like pure bhakti, where you're offering to. This is bhakti with a motive. This is kind of karma kanda, mimamsa. This is like Vedic rituals where you do sacrifices for motive, right? The Gita speaks against this. So, but this is a Vedic kind of ritual where you're doing it for offspring or whatever it might be, in this case, offspring. So it gives that sweet rice to the queen, the eldest and principal. Then he said to the monarch, a son will be born to you, O king. Now, listen carefully. He will be a source of joy and also of sorrow to you. And at that Angira, the son of that cryptic statement, off he goes, he departed. But the king doesn't want to hear the second bit. He's absorbed in the first bit, right? So it came to be Just from eating that sweet dish, Queen Krityaduti became pregnant from Citraketu, right? The story is about Citraketu, just as Kritika did for Agni. And then you have an old Vedic story that's in footnote 39, right? Some older sort of story where a similar kind of thing happened. Because of the potency of the king of the Surasenas, now this would be sexual potency, which Patanjali calls virya, her pregnancy grew gradually every day, just like the waxing moon, O king, right? So she's getting bigger and bigger. In due course, time arrived, son was born, causing great joy among the Shurasena citizens who heard the news. Remember, this is a frame story. Then we're going to get slammed with jnana. But our mind gets sucked in, right? Aren't we sucked in now? What's going to happen? So the king was overjoyed. When his son had been bathed, cleansed, and decorated, the king had benedictions chanted by the Brahmanas, all these, Vedic hymns for well-being, right? Sahana, Bhonakto, Sahana. Well, these are not yogi hymns. These are Vedic hymns for material well-being. Some of them anyway, many of them. And then he arranged for the birth ceremony to be performed. So this is a royal Vedic ritual, right? We have our state functions and processions and whatever we have, or what ancient India, what would you do? He bestowed upon the Brahmanas gold, silver, garments, ornaments, right? Complete faith in the Brahmanas, because they're performing the Vedic rituals, which is kind of keeping everything going. The power of the ritual. Horses, elephants, and 6 crores of cows. Clearly, that's an exaggeration. A crore is 100 lakhs, and a lakh is 100,000. So put another 2 zeros on 100,000. What do you get? 10 million. So 6 of those. So 60 million. The magnanimous regent also showered desirable things on the other citizens for the prosperity, fame, and longevity of his son, just like rain clouds shower on living beings, right? So he's sharing his joy with all the citizens of the kingdom. Since the son had been obtained with difficulty, he had been sonless for a long time, the affection of the saintly king grew for him every day, just as does the affection of a poor man for wealth when it is attained with difficulty. An excessive affection born out of ignorance. I'm going to get these little things thrown in, these little spoilers. Why is it? Because I'm this body mind, and this son is my son. This little body mind is mine, right? From a high level, deep level jnana point of view, it's all Maya, it's all ignorance, right? You don't have that, as the story will go on to explain. It also grew in the mother, Krityaduti, for her son. Now the other queens are envious. Meanwhile, a fever of desire for bearing children burned in her co-wives, right? Desire burns, it's rajas. Rajas burns, it's the fiery energy. And if you have a desire, it burns you, and it very quickly morphs into tamas. If the desire is not fulfilled, it morphs into tamas, my friends. This is the psychological sequencing of obsessive desire. If we can't let it go, then sooner or later it's going to take ugly contours. To accomplish our aims, we become tamasic, which means violent or whatever it might mean. As he fondled his son every day, special affection for the wife who had given him birth grew in the king. Now we know where this is heading, don't we? Clearly, right? So he's favoring her even more, even she was already the principal queen. This was not matched towards the other wives. They become somewhat neglected because he's with his baby boy all the time, and naturally with the mother of the baby boy. Overwhelmed by envy, so now the desire is morphing into tamas, envy. By the distress of being childless, right? Frustrated desire. And by the indifference of the king, again, frustrated desire, because they want to also be favored by the king. The other wives lamented their situation. Woe betide an unfortunate woman who is childless and not respected in her home. She is neglected as if she were a servant by the co-wives who have beautiful sons. This is a monarchical household, and it wouldn't be no different from anything anywhere in Europe or anywhere else. In fact, what distress is there for servant girls who are respected by their steady service of the masters, right? The servants girls are going to be respected because they do nice service, but an unfortunate woman is like a maidservant of a maidservant. We're even lower than the servant girls, right? So they're kind of puffed up queens who are now entering in a state of tamas. In this way, intense hatred is growing, right? That rajas, unfulfilled rajas just intensifies into ever-increasing tamas. Hatred arose in the queens. They were tormented both by their co-wives' blessing of a son and by being neglected by the king. Being unable to tolerate the king anymore, the cruel-hearted, they became cruel-hearted. Rajas makes us cruel-hearted. I mean, they might have been wonderful, nice queens at one point, pious, simple, innocent queens. But this desire, a desire can turn any of us. Just witness your own desire, how it makes you, if you really cling on to it, how, you can start contemplating very negative, insensitive, violent kind of thinking, tamasic thinking. So they became cruel-hearted. They administered poison to the infant. Their good sense had become destroyed by hatred, so they had good sense. This is what happens. When we allow rajas to dominate our mind, what's a good sense? Sattva, clarity, dharma, righteousness, honesty, compassion, sensitive, all the sattvic qualities get overwhelmed by rajas. And if rajas rules the mind, eventually it has to morph. It's not just going to stay there. It's going to morph into tamas, unless we control it and try to eliminate it. Their good sense had been destroyed by hatred. Unaware of the great sin performed by her co-wives, Citraketu looked at her son and, thinking he was just sleeping, wandered about the house. Eventually, thinking the boy had been sleeping rather a long time, the intelligent woman requested the nurse, "My dear, please bring me my son." Upon approaching the supine child, the nurse saw that his eyes were turned upward and that his life airs, powers of senses, and mind had passed away. "I am doomed," she said. She's got to bring the bad news. Oh my God. And she fell to the ground. Upon hearing the highly distressed cry of her maid, who was also wildly beating her breast with her two hands, the queen hastily entered the room and approached her son. She saw that he had suddenly died. Overwhelmed by shock, she fell to the ground and lost consciousness, her hair and clothes in disarray. Thereupon, upon hearing the commotion, all the people living in the king's palace, men as well as women, came to the scene. They too became overwhelmed with grief, sharing in the calamity. Those who had committed the evil deed also wailed falsely. When he heard that his son had died of unknown causes, the king became blind with grief. He rushed there, stumbling on the way due to intense grief, inflamed by the bonds of affection. Okay, so that's the nature of rajas. When it becomes frustrated at some point, then it becomes tamas, grief, lamentation, right? Because you've lost something that you were attached to. This is the nature of attachment. Sooner or later, you lose it and thrust into grief. Surrounded by his ministers and brahmanas, the king fell unconscious at the feet of his dead son. Taking long drawn-out breaths, he was unable to speak. His, physiologically, well, we know this, grief does this, right? His voice became choked up and muffled with tears, and his clothes and hair were thrown into disarray. At this, when the pure-hearted queen saw her husband overwhelmed with this grief over the dead boy, his only son, she lamented in various ways. This increased the heartfelt pain of the ministers and citizens. So everyone is now lamenting and moaning, a typical death scene. She bathed her two breasts, which normally, right, beautified with ointment and kumkum powder. That's the kumkum is the kind of red powder that a married woman puts on her breast, with mascara-laden teardrops. Tearing at her hair, her garland in disarray, she lamented in various ways for her son in a lovely voice, like a kurari bird. This sort of, in classic, normally in a romance scene, normally the kurari bird is a sign of romance. The bhav of a play or the bhav of a scene is set, right? Full moon means romance, jasmine flowers means romance. So there's certain signifiers in literature and in drama that give a sense of what the bhav is going to be, what the mood is going to be. It's going to be tragedy, is it going to be romance? So kurari bird always laments for its beloved. So therefore, we know it's going to be, so it's just a kind of a signifier. Alas, so she starts criticizing Ishvara now. Have you ever done that, my friends? Have you ever shaken your fist at I have, more than I tell you, I have. Shaking your fist at Bhagavan. That's why people actually become atheists. A good, both in the Indian tradition and in the Western tradition, you can't understand how can a benevolent God allow so much suffering. But anyway, have you ever, I don't, I've done that many a time, and it's not obviously not supportive of bhakti, but it does indicate a real emotional relationship. Because if you have a real emotional relationship and you're honest about it, then there are going to be, the gopis get mad at Krishna. Now, I'm not saying I'm on the same level as the gopis, but they get mad at him. The gopis say, "You reciprocate with us, you stubborn one." Somebody made me a t-shirt once. Reciprocate, you stubborn one. So they, so I'm not in any way sort of promoting, but there's something real about getting angry with Ishvara, but obviously not something we should. Actually, when I got initiated by my guru, and he gave me the Hare Krishna mantra, you receive it from the guru in the ear, and you give the guru your japa, and he chants on it, and then he gives it back to you, and it was, he told me two things. He said, "Don't be angry at Ishvara, and don't be angry at Guru." And I was puzzled, I was like, why would I ever be angry at Ishvara? Why would I be angry at Guru? But I understand that now, because he must have known, that I'm a shaker of the fist at the heaven. Anyway, so that was very interesting. He said that to me, and now I try to, I would never be angry at my Guru, but certainly sometimes you have a little hissy fit at Bhagavan, at least I do. All right, enough of that. So now she's doing that. "Oh, Creator, you must be really foolish, since because it's not natural for the child to die. In fact, in some stories, if the child dies before the parent, you go and blame the king. There's stories where there must be a dharma in this kingdom. My child has died before me. There's stories like that. Not in the Bhagavatam, I don't think, but elsewhere. If everything is dharmic, then everything is going according to the laws of dharma. The child should never die before the parent. In a purely dharmic kind of, that's the expectation, take it or leave it. So you must be really foolish, since this death comes to the subsequent generation while the previous one still lives. You are acting against the rules of your own creation. Because the rules of creation, the dharma, if everyone's following their dharma, then this is unnatural. And if it's not the case, then you must surely be an enemy. And if that's not the case, then you must hate me. Don't you sometimes think, why does God hate me? Why does God hate me? So she's just deranged now. Perhaps the fact is that there is no chronological order in this world in the birth and death of embodied beings, and that things happen in accordance with personal karma. Even then, she's saying, oh, maybe it's just karma. Even then, you have severed the bond of affection for this child. And this bond was made by you, yourself, for the growth of creation, right? You created sex desire, so that species could continue. So that's your creation, and therefore you're foolish. You're acting against your own laws. In which case you must be really foolish. My darling son, after seeing your father overwhelmed with grief, you should not abandon me. Now she's talking to the dead baby. I'm inconsolable and helpless. Through you, we will easily cross over this darkness of samsara, right? Because your children then, do their offerings and so forth. It is difficult to cross over without offspring. Get up, darling. These friends of yours of your age are calling you to play. You've surely slept for long enough and are ravished by hunger. Drink from my breast. Remove our sorrow and that of our friends and family, O joy of your father. My good fortune is gone, O son, for I cannot see your innocent smile, your happy eyes, lotus face. I do not hear your charming voice. Or have you been taken by that cruel one, Yama, lord of death? Have you gone to the next world from where there is no return? Sri Shuka said, as his wife was mourning the dead son with various laments of this sort, Citraketu, greatly aggrieved, wailed at the top of his voice along with her. As that husband and wife were lamenting, all their attendants, men and women, wept. Everybody became deprived of life. the sage known as Angira, knew that the king had fallen into the state of despair, that his peace of mind was destroyed, and that he was without a guide. So he's the guru now. The guru has to be there for the disciple. So here, right there with Nārada, that's what the guru is for, to give us spiritual, not to say, oh, you know, all useless things. Oh, I'm so sorry. Accept my condolences. No, other people can do that. Your friends and family can do that, not the sage. You're going to give you jnana. I'm going to take the opportunity to give you some real jnana. That's the guru. Guru means heavy. You're not going to tap you on the shoulder and say, oh, I'm so sorry. Let's see. Well, maybe Angira chit-chats for a bit. All right, let's see. The king, overwhelmed with grief and lying next to the dead body, seemed equally dead himself. The two sages spoke to him and enlightened him with words of wisdom. This is our friend, those who speak to us when we're down, not just sort of saying useless things, but that give us jnana. That's a friend. Straight to the point. This person for whom you grieve, O king, whom do you suppose he was to you in a previous life? Or is it present? Or will be in a future life? And who are you to him? When you die, where are your children? You're not going to meet him in the next life. Who were they in the past? You don't know. Which family they came from? Jnana. Bang. Straight in your face. Just as grains of sand are brought together and then thrust apart by the force of the current, so in the same way, embodied beings are joined and separated by time. And another metaphor in the Bhagavatam is two bits of straw in the ocean. They come together for a second, brought together by the wave, and the next wave thrusts them apart. That's jnana. You want consolation? Go hang out with your family and friends. You're not going to get that from the real sage. But the real sage was going to give you words that will not just temporarily, you know, make you feel better for a few moments, but will actually give you words that, if you listen, will pull you out of that state of grief. So that's actually the real solution for any bewildered, confused, distressed state of mind. Just as amongst seeds of grain, some seeds are productive and some are not productive. Similarly, among living beings impelled by the Maya of the Lord, some living beings survive and some do not. There's karma. You, we, and all these moving and non-moving entities who appear contemporaneous do not factually exist even in the present. Our forms are all temporary creations of Maya, of the three gunas. Maya is the three gunas. Maya is the three gunas. You ever wonder what Maya is? Why isn't it on the Sankhya chart? Because it's not some other thing. It's the three gunas. Devi, he, Esha, guna, Mayi, mama Maya, Krishna says. This is my Maya. And what is it? It's Daivi, it's divine. What else is it? Daivi, he, Isha, guna, Mayi. It's made of the gunas. So they're in tamas now. When we were in a state of grief, we're in tamas. Before he was in rajas. So we don't factually exist even at the present. O king, just as we did not exist before our births and deaths, nor will we exist after them. What does he mean by this? Obviously, the Atman is existing. He must be speaking about the body. Although he is impartial like a boy at play, the Lord of all beings creates, preserves, and destroys beings by means of other beings. Right? There's death. One living entity devours another living entity according to karma. These beings are not independent, but created from himself. But by this he means, of course, the bodies must be, because the soul is eternal. The body of the embodied one is born from a body, the mother, by means of another body, the father. Nothing to do with the Atman, right? So we talked about conception. So therefore the body of the father in the form of semen enters the body of the mother. And so one body is born from another body. Just as a seed is generated from another seed. But the embodied one, and the Gita loves this word, the Dehanaha, is eternal. Just as objects like the atoms of the earth are eternal, the ingredients of Prakriti are eternal. Well, the gunas are anyway. So the Atman is eternal. The distinction between the embodied one and the body is construed What's he saying? This distinction between the embodied one and the body is construed by lack of discrimination and is primordial. There's a mistake here. To see the distinction is wisdom. I have to check the Sanskrit now. What is, but lack of discrimination, as Patanjali says, right? Viveka is drashtra drishyaho samyoga, to think you are the body. So this must be this identification between the embodied one and the body is construed by lack of discrimination and is primordial. But to understand the distinction is viveka. So it seems to me I've made a mistake here. I have to follow up on that. It is imagined just as the distinction in an object between its universal and its individuator. Don't worry about that. That's a metaphysical category. Shuka said, consoled in this way by those, and then we can follow the footnotes if you're interested in that. That's Vaisheshika metaphysics. There are individuators that keep an irreducible particle, that keep it a particle so it doesn't dissolve. It's called an individuator. What do I call it here? It's individuator. And the universal is like, like Aristotle and philosophers posit there are universals. And a universal is something like cowness and tableness, that we can lump different things together into categories like there are cows in the field. Well, why don't we say there are 10 objects in the field? Why do we say there are 10 cows in the field? What is that common property that they all have? Well, not so much Sankhya, but the other metaphysical schools posit they have universals. So let's not worry about that. Consoled in this way by these words spoken by the Brahman, King Citraketu wiped his distraught face with his hands and responded. The king said, "Who are you two?" He's not recognizing his guru, "who have arrived disguised in the garb of ascetic mendicants. Full of wisdom, you are the most distinguished of the distinguished. There are certainly Brahmanas who are dear to Bhagavan, roaming the earth at will, disguised as madmen. Remember Bharat's story. Enlightening those with such as I who have a dull understanding." And they still are to this day, my friends. Great beings. Just don't get roped into charisma and, but there are great beings. Just be careful. If you're sincere and if you surrender to Ishvara 100%, then there's every chance Ishvara will allow you to encounter a great being. But be careful of running around. Because if you run around looking for a guru, and I know I raised this point many times, that's only because I've seen, I lived in an ashram for 7 years and I just saw one disaster after another, including my first guru turned out to be, I won't even go there. But if you go around looking for the guru, what are you bringing? You're bringing your impure mind, your avidya mind. We all have avidya mind, unless you're right. So we have our klishta mind, and we're going around. Our klishta mind is going to sort of what kind of an instrument is that? It's simply going to, because it's klishta, it's going to think that someone with charisma or maybe learning or some maybe even mystic power or some siddhi, we're going to confound and think, oh, that's my guru. What's the point of you running around with your klishta mind? So then what? Surrender to Ishvara. And hand the problem over to Ishvara. Let Ishvara, if you just say, Ishvara, look, the text say I have to have a guru. I'm accepting that, but I'm not. I have no way of identifying who is a real. How can you identify who is a real guru with a klishta mind? You might be able to compare it with the Shastra, okay, but even then, that's iffy. So you just hand the problem over to Ishvara. Say, Ishvara, just if I need to approach you through a guru, you make that arrangement, and then you hand the problem over and don't even think about it again. Trust me, my friends. You don't have to reject the idea of a guru, but let Ishvara make that arrangement. You surrender to Ishvara. I've seen so many gurus fall down and traumatize the disciples. So many.
Can I just ask quickly, does it also mean do we also have to have that same discernment when joining a community? Like, for example, I've been going to the ISKCON temple here in Boston, and it's, some of the experiences are nice, but there's that, I'm not all into that particular community per se, but I love a lot of the things there. I guess, do we practice that same discernment with communities?
Absolutely, Happy Jack, and especially in ISKCON. I was 7 years in ISKCON, so I mean, and in ISKCON there was a lot of social pressure to take a guru. And what happens is the other disciples, because they've made that choice, they need to feel reassured in that. So when newcomers come, they want to sort of rope you in, and it's not, devotees are sincere. I mean, there's cult-like features there, but that doesn't make it an out-and-out cult. So there can be sort of a mixture between cult-like features where there's too much focus on a charismatic, authority. So therefore go for the kirtan, go for the prasadam. There's lovely devotees there. Make friends with them all, but don't get roped into any kind of guru. And there'll be a certain amount of pressure that, you can't please Krishna if you don't have a guru. Just don't have a discussion. Just let it, just say namaha, just give a nice namaste, change the subject, and enjoy the prasad, enjoy the kirtan, enjoy the deities. And, there's some lovely people that are mature. Not everyone's like that. And then in terms of the guru, just put that in the lap of Ishvara. Let him take care of that. Then don't even think about it. There's too much guru bhav in not just ISKCON, but other similar, and I'm not going to name, but you named ISKCON, but there's other institutions, ashrams, too much focus on the guru. And that's dangerous. And then the guru has problems, and then there's trauma, and then many disciples leave, and they turn their back on the spiritual path. So you're so enthusiastic, but and that's a wonderful, beautiful thing, but don't get, I think you're wise. I think you're wise. Trust, trust your inner compass, trust your intelligence, because that's Bhagavan.
Yeah, my inner compass keeps me from going all in. It becomes a little tricky when you read about someone like Radhanath Swami. I don't know him personally, but he seems like, I can't think of anything bad to say about that man. But, he is part of ISKCON, for example. Yeah. So it just becomes tricky.
Happy Jack.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Okay.
Charisma is not, on the list of the guru, charisma is not listed on the qualities of the guru. It's complete and utter detachment, no ego, complete and utter 24 hours mind absorbed in Bhagavan. I'm not going to mention any names, but just be careful. We can talk about this. I don't want to discuss this in public, okay? Don't go there. You appreciate that, honestly. I have some things to say, but I won't say them now. Okay? All right, we can talk. We can talk another time, on Zoom or whatever. So, on we go. So here are the great sages. Kumara, Nārada, Dribura, Angira, Devala. Okay, these are the great sages of the Puranic tradition. Vyas is there, you recognize him. Who are Rama, Bhagavan Rama, he's listed as a sage. Kapila, that's Sankhya. Badarayana, that's Vedanta, the author of Vedanta, Yajnavalkya. You may recognize some of these, right? Patanjali, here he is, he made it to the list, Patanjali. Who else? Hiranya, who might you know? None of those. Okay. These perfected masters wander about for the sake of imparting knowledge. They have no other business. They're Jivan Muktas. Or, and that they just wander around to enlighten others. Therefore, O Masters, please bestow the light of knowledge upon me. He says to this two sages, I'm a vulgar beast. He's putting himself down, right? Attached to his body, to his appetites. My intelligence is dull, and I'm immersed in obscuring tamas. Sri Angira said, I am Angira, thou king, the one who bestowed a son upon you in the first place when you desired one. Don't you recognize me? And this is he's so overcome with grief, he doesn't even recognize his own guru. And this is his lordship, sage Nārada himself, the son of Brahma. You're now immersed in tamas because of grief over your son. It's difficult to overcome, but we did not forget you and have come here, O Master, to show kindness to you. You're a servant of the Supreme Being, and the king is a Vaishnava, a Bhagavata, a devotee. And you don't deserve to be in this situation. Do not lament. You're a Bhakta Bhagavan, devoted to the Brahmanas, O Master. When I first came to your house, I could have given you supreme knowledge at that time, right? The sage comes to your house. Don't be asking for sons or daughters. Ask for jnana. You wasted, I could have given you supreme knowledge at that time. He wasn't ready to hear. His mind was so overwhelmed with rajas that the sage's words could not penetrate through that veil of rajas. He said, I could have given it to you, but when I understood that you were intent on something else, well, then I just gave you a son. Okay, you want a son, take a son. Not ready. You're not ready to receive jnana. So now you're experiencing the suffering of those who have sons. Any attachment causes suffering. Why? Because that object of attachment sooner or later gets taken away. Maybe this one will rather rapidly, but sooner or later gets taken away. Your children grow up, they become children that they take directions you're not happy with, whatever it is. In some form or fashion, all of our attachments, if only, even if it's just at death, but sooner or later get taken away. The same holds true for those who have wives, homes, riches, prosperity, and powers of various sorts. It's all temporary. The gunas are shifting, karma changes. One moment you have a good patch, then there's a bad patch, you lose everything. The temporary objects of the senses, such as sound, the opulence, right, just like sound, it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes, all the objects of senses. The opulences of kingship, a mighty kingdom, strength, treasury, servants, ministers, and friends, right, he's a king. They all are attachments, and they're all temporary. And by what does that mean? It means when they go, when their time, when the allotted period expires, then one is thrust into grief. If one is attached to it, then one is thrust into grief. These all bestow trouble, fear, illusion, and grief, right? We have to, if we have an attachment, we have to procure it, then we have to maintain it, then we have to defend it, then we have to stop it from deteriorating. I mean, it's just trouble and grief. And does it give us happiness? No. They bestow trouble, fear, illusion, and grief, O Lord of the Shura, Senas, the king. They're dreams, maya, concoctions of the mind we think is going to make us happy. If I have money, I'll be happy. If I have a partner, I'll be happy. If I have this, I'll be happy. All castles in the sky. Their appearance is like the city of the Gandharvas, literally a castle in the sky, right? That's that. Actually, we have the same saying, curiously. We say a castle in the sky. Was it Joni Mitchell who sang something about castle in the sky or clouds in the sky? Anyway, so they in Sanskrit it's called the city of the Gandharvas, who are celestial beings. They're creations of the mind. The mind tries to convince us that if this desire is fulfilled, we'll be happy. If we obtain that, we'll be happy. It's the mind that tries to convince us, and then we strive, and of course create karma in that striving, and then we attain, or if we don't attain it, we're thrust into grief. If we do attain it, then it's disappointing, then we have to struggle to maintain it, and sooner or later it's taken away. So either way, we end up in a state of suffering and dissolution and frustration. This is the nature of desire. The creations of the mind. Although they are perceived, they're not real, right? Mental things are not real. They're just some skaras strung together. You want to have a partner, so you create this mental image of, you put bits of noses and ears and hair together in some ideal partner-esque form, and you dream and we dream. It's not real. They're without enduring substance. There's no tattva behind it. They're made of mind stuff. A person contemplates them with the mind, right? I want to go to Hawaii. I want to do this. I want to do that. Right, Happy Jack? I want to go to Harvard, whatever it might be. Due to the force of past karma. And then produces further varieties of karma, because when we strive after these things, right? So they themselves are the force of past karma, desires from the past that are still pressing. And then we try to fulfill them, and then we just produce further varieties of karma. In fact, this body of the embodied one is made of the gross elements of matter. This is the Sankhya metaphysics, right? The five gross physical body, the knowledge acquiring in senses and action performing senses, the 10 indriyas, the karma indriyas, jnana indriyas. It is said that it brings suffering and various afflictions to the embodied one. As long as we have a body and mind, we suffer. And that's why we need to cultivate detachment and fix our mind on, if you're a Jnani, you fix a mind on the Atman. If you're a Bhakta, you fix your mind on Bhagavan. Therefore, reflect on the true situation of the Atman with a sound mind. Give up the conviction that objects in the world of duality are stable. Don't think your children or your sons or your treasure, they're not stable. Give that up, that conviction, that dream that you will find some stable happiness. It doesn't exist except in the mind, and the mind isn't real. The images of the mind are not real. They're memories, samskaras put together in a melange, in a patchwork. Then you will attain a state of peace. Give up desire, then you become peaceful. Then nothing can control you. Nothing has power over you. Otherwise, the desire has power over you. If you have sex desire, then the object of that sex desire has power over you, or any other kind of desire, money, whatever it is. So Nārada says, please accept the teaching, the Upanishad. Look, please accept the Upanishad of this mantra that I bestow upon you. Right now, he's going to give, the Guru gives the mantra. So that's the way to fix the mind on Ishvara, is through the mantra. So meditating upon it, you will have a vision of Vishnu. So if you fix your mind on the mantra, not just fix your mind in a kind of willpower sort of way, that's there too, but there has to be bhakti. There has to be, you have to surrender to the mantra devotionally. That's the difference between a jnani and a bhakta. The jnani can do the mantra just out of willpower and just rigidity and inflexibility of mind. Fine, then you can attain the Atman that way. You can't attain Bhagavan, because Bhagavan can only be won by love and surrender and humility. So that's the difference between how a bhakta chants a mantra and how a jnani might chant a mantra. I'm not, that doesn't apply in all instances, but I keep, you know, you've seen me stress this point because the Bhagavatam stressed this point, but the difference between a jnana seeking path and a Bhagavan seeking path. And that plays out in all spheres, including the way you chant the very mantra. Because you can attain your Atman by sheer willpower. That's what Chitta Vritti Nirodha is. But although even Patanjali slips in Ishvara and then says in chapter 2, well, you can, Ishvara will give you samadhi. Even he slips that in. But very much under developed. So let's go back to our great story. So then, O king, after this, the celestial sage granted a vision of the king's dead son. He said, okay, let me show you your son, right? You take the mantra, but let's just sort of sort out the son business. To all the grieving kingsmen. Then he spoke. Sri Nārada said, now he speaks to the dead son. O Jivatman, blessings upon you. So he's calling back the Atman. The Atman has left the body. Just look at your mother and father and your friends and relatives burning with intense grief because of what you have done. Right, he's setting the stage for more jnana here. He calls back the soul. Take back possession of your body for the remainder of your life. He's being rhetorical here. Of course, he knows it's not going to happen. But he wants to play this out for the benefit of the king. He wants to really give jnana in a kind of dramatic way that will really shake the king out of this illusory grief. Take back possession of your body, he says to the departed soul. Surrounded by your kinsmen, indulge in the enjoyments bestowed by your father, afterwards a prince, and eventually ascend to the throne of the king yourself. The Jiva soul said, in accordance with karma, I have been transmigrating through numerous births, right? As a celestial being, animal and human. In which birth were these two, my mother and father? Slap in the face, bang. Can you imagine? The mom and dad are like, oh yeah, bring back our kid. And the soul comes back and says, and which parents are you? I've had unlimited parents. How about that? Slap of jnana. Un schiaffo di jnana. We came up with a term in Italian. Un schiaffo di jnana. Carl, you speak Italian, right? Un bel schiaffone di jnana. Which birth were you, my parents? Kinsmen, relatives, enemies, those who are neutral, friends, the indifferent, and adversaries. Everyone becomes each of these in turn, in mutually reciprocating roles with everybody else. Like you may be my enemy in this life, maybe a friend in the past life. Karma just throws us around like straw in the ocean. Says the soul. This is the soul speaking now. Just like objects such as articles of trade or gold, move about from here to there among people, right? Think of where your dollar bills, how many hands have they exchanged? You have no way of knowing. So does, just like that. So does the jiva move about in various wombs and procreators. Now you're my friend, last life you were my enemy. The relationships with objects and living beings among people is clearly seen to be impermanent. It's all impermanent. So-called sons and family and partners and all of it is impermanent. We didn't have the same family relationships in the past life, and we won't have in the next life. Yet for as long as there is a relationship with things, there is a sense of mindness. This is maya, this is avidya, right? Avidya is asmita or ahankara, to think I am, but it also means this is mine. It's just an extension of, if I think I am this body mind, then I think that my possessions of my body mind are mama, mine, mama in Sanskrit, mama tva, mineness. The Sanskrit is mama tva. Over them, ownership. The jiva is eternal without any ahankara in its pure form. Yet when it attains a particular birth, a sense of this belongs to me, this is my child, this is my son, this is my wife, this is my family, this is my kingdom, this belongs to me, right, in inverted commas, because of asmita, it develops in it for as long as it finds itself in that particular birth. And the next birth, it has a different asmita ahankara, and then it's a dog, and it's thinking, I'm a dog. This is my doggy mother and father, and that's the cat, and I don't like cats. But the soul is eternal, imperishable, subtle, the sport of everything, and self-aware in its pure nature. Svarupa Vastanam. Being a master, it creates its own universe for itself. We get the subtle body, and we can use that as an instrument, and we act, and we create karma, and so we create our own universe. We create the jati ayubhoga, as Patanjali frames it, through its own gunas of Maya. But the actual soul, no one is dear to it, no one is enemy, no one is kin, right? Does it remind you of the Gita? No one foreign to it. It is the one seer, the drashtra, look, the same term, drashtahu swarupe vastanam. It's the one seer of all the minds of the performers of virtuous and faulty acts. So that could be the different minds the one seer has, right? Because the subtle body is always changing. Or it could mean that all different minds in different bodies, they all have an Atman. I'm not sure, I have to look at the text, but it doesn't matter. Both are jnana-laden ways of reading this. The soul does not, in fact, accept the fruits of activity, virtuous, faulty. It's the body. It is the Lord who is seated neutrally as the witness of cause and effect. So the body gets karma, the mind gets karma, but because consciousness is absorbed in the body-mind, then it becomes aware of the states of body-mind, and therefore it becomes aware of suffering and distress and all other states. But you can narrow it down to suffering and distress, because that's one way of just thinking about everything. Is it causing me suffering, sukha or dukkha? So Shuka son of Badarayana said, after uttering these words, the jiva then departed, and its relatives were struck with amazement. So now when you get a real heavy dose of, a real guru gives you jnana, they severed the bonds of personal affection, my friends. That's what it means. Not ready for it? Fine. Not ready for it? Fine. But don't change the bar. This is the bar. We have to be free of all attachments if we seek both either Atma Jnana or Krishna Prema, love of Bhagavan. That's the bar. All right, so you're not ready for it? I'll just be honest. Okay, I'm not ready for it. I'll work to it. I'll work towards it. I'll do my practices, and I still have my attachments, and that's fine. And I'll slowly, by practice, if not in this birth, then, Krishna promises in the Gita, or if you're sincere, you do your practices, you're a yogi, you pick up in the next life. And it would be, at least be honest. Don't try changing where the bar is, my friends. It's not New Age spirituality. This is heavy-duty jnana. Carl, we'll take questions at the end. Let's just go through this. You can ask the first question. So, after removing the dead body of their relative and performing all the appropriate rites, Vedic rites, death rites, the kinsmen gave up their affection. This affection is our attachments and affection is the giver of grief, illusion, fear, and distress. It is so difficult to give up. Even though our attachments give us so much suffering, it's difficult to give up. Remembering the words of the sage, the killers of the child are the queens who had lost their luster because of the child's murder. Their karma was catching up with them, and their guilt, and now they have to hide the act, and so now they have to sort of be duplicitous, and so they just lose their shakti. They've lost all their shakti. They became ashamed. So under the direction of Brahmanas, they undertook the penance for infanticide, right? So even for infanticide, there are dharmic sort of penances, and they did that. They're on the banks of the Yamuna River. And I want to read another story with you, my friends, tonight. Well, when Citraketu's mind was enlightened this way by the words of the Brahmana, he stepped out from the dark well of household life. Why a dark well? Because you can't get out of a well, my friends. If you're attached to your family, it's like a well, you fall in it and you can't get out unless someone pulls you out of it, which is the scriptures and the guru and Bhagavan. It's a well. And you just simply we dig ourselves deeper and deeper into it. So he stepped out from the dark well of household life. I mean, the jnana is harsh. It's supposed to be harsh. Well, life is harsh, and death is harsh, and old age is harsh. and rebirth is harsh. So if you want to just sort of water it all down in New Age, mumbo jumbo, fine. But this is jnana. It's in your face. And all the traditional texts are like that. You read, the pre-modern Vedanta, yoga, Buddhism, Jainism. This is jnana. They have their metaphysical differences, but no one knows. This is it. This is moksha. These are the moksha traditions. There's not just the Bhagavatam. So then he bathed in the river, right, and did pious rites, and he worshipped his gurus, and then he did pranayama. And then the venerable Nārada, pleased with the Bhakta king, controlled his mind, and then and accepted the mantra, accepted their instructions, and then he gave him the following mantra: Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Let me contemplate reverence to Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarsana. So that's the mantra he gives him. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. He gives him a little sort of thing. Reverence to da-da-da-da-da-da. He gives them a little sort of hymn, right? Reverence to Vishnu, and you have a form of supreme bliss. Remember, the form of Ishvara is not made of Prakriti. Satchidananda. You delight in your own nature. You're peaceful in your knowledge. So this nice little hymn. This is Ishvara, who is still not understood when words have exhausted themselves. You can exhaust every possible word in human vocabulary, and the mind can engage in any kind of thinking and inference, and you cannot understand Bhagavan. Now, right from the Upanishads, words cannot reach there, mind cannot grasp it. He has no material name and form, but he has a pure consciousness. He has a spiritual name and form. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya being one of his, one of his names, and transcends cause and effect. May he be favorably disposed. So this is a Bhagavan. He doesn't have a material name and form. So when name and form is denied, it's prakritic name and form that is denied. That doesn't exclude or preclude Brahman, Saguna Brahman name and form. Okay. So then so he has this hymn. What else do we want to do? So then look, for 7 days, imbibing only water, Citraketu meditated with focused attention on that practice in the manner instructed and imparted by Nārada. He accepted his guru. Right? He has 2 gurus. Then, O king, at the end of 7 days, but this is 24-hour concentration now, not 20 minutes on in the morning. By concentrating on that practice without interruption, he attained the position of lordship over the celestials. That's after 7 days, he surpassed the celestials. But that's not the goal, obviously. Thereafter, a few more days later still, so in other words, he doesn't get sidetracked. Just like Patanjali says, watch out for these cities, don't get sidetracked. They're not of interest to the yogis, neither are celestial realms. So he attained them, not just attained them, lordship over them. By 7 days of intense dharana, dhyana, absolute dhyana. He kept going, didn't get seduced. Thereafter, a few more days still, the flow of his mind became enlightened, and he attained the presence of the feet of Shesha. That's Patanjali, a form of Vishnu. He saw the Lord, who was white as a lotus fiber, and then we get the description, wearing blue garments, adorned with radiant, right? He's white, but Shesha wears blue garments, adorned with a radiant headdress, armlet, belts, and belt and bracelets. He had a smiling face, so he has a vision of a form of Vishnu, and surrounded by the entourage of perfected yogi masters. All the king's sins were destroyed from the darshana. It's called darshana, seeing the Lord, and his subtle body became pure and cleansed, because it's the mind that has to become pure and cleansed. The Atman is already pure and cleansed. So the subtle body becomes pure and cleansed. His eyes filled with tears of love. This is bhakti, not from the bliss of the Atman. You're right. This is the love of another, of God as distinct. From intensified devotion, and his hair stood on end. So the body now is freaking out physiologically because of this power. The body is not meant to take the kind of intense states of love that accrue from bhakti. He approached silently and offered homage to the primordial being. So then he eventually controls his mind and does his namaha, namaha, namaha. And what else? Let's go on to another story. Because this now talks about if you're interested in cosmology and the universe with its 7 layers, then this whole actual the whole 5th book of the Bhagavatam is about cosmology, if you're interested in that, Puranic cosmology. All right, so therefore, let's jump over here. So Bhagavan Ananta, which is Shesha, was glorified. He was pleased with these sincere, beautiful homages, and he spoke to Citraketu. And now Bhagavan in this form of Shesha says, you have attained a perfection by accepting the teachings about me delivered to you by Nārada and Angira. And here we see how the Guru is central. The Guru is, whoops, what did I just do? The Guru, that's the Sanskrit dictionary, by the way. This is online. You can put in roots. I think I've already explained that to you. The Guru is there, but just don't go. Notice the Guru came to Citraketu. He didn't go running around. See? So the Guru comes, sent by Ishvara. That's the process, my friends. Otherwise you get cheated. I can't stress that enough. So you have attained perfection. How did you attain a perfection? By teaching, by accepting the teachings about me from your gurus, Nārada and Angira. And they didn't. Notice the Guru didn't. They're not. They're not. He's not like a slave. Serving them every day. The Guru came. They came for half an hour. Well, let's not mention any names, but some of these institutions with institutionalized guru, you're serving them hand like servants, and the gurus are trapped in their own ego and ignorance. How are they going to help you break free of your ego and ignorance when they're trapped by themselves? Trust your intelligence, trust your heart on that one, because Ishvara will give you intelligence. And just leave it alone and let Ishvara take care of it. And then if you feel, some points, even then, be very, very careful. So, I am the soul of all beings. And he followed that technique, right? Which was fixing the mind on the mantra. So that's japa. Even Patanjali says tad japa. But that's Patanjali's method, is japa. And then he says, okay, you can fix your mind on these other things, but he's not very enthusiastic about the other things. In chapter 1, he stresses Ishvara japa, and he says Ishvara is this, da 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 da, and this is his vachaka, his om, right? And what do you do with the om? Tad japa. So that's really what he's offering. And then because he doesn't want to be too, he says, okay, but can also fix it or anything else. And he gives a strange little list of sort of 5 or 6 other things, some of which are a bit strange. It's japa, all the text, japa, 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 mantra, 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 mantra. I am the soul of all beings, and I cause the welfare of beings. I am Shabda Brahman, that's mantra. I'm Brahman in the form of sound, Shabda. That's mantra. Ishvara comes as mantra. That's a special gift, especially in the Kali Yuga. That the Puranas all say, mantra in the Kali Yuga. Because it's easy. There were different methods in previous. This Ashtanga actually comes from the Satya Yuga. Real hardcore Ashtanga is from a previous age, actually, according to the Puranas anyway. So I am Shabda Brahman and the Supreme Pada Brahman. These are both my eternal forms. So Ishvara comes as sound, and he comes in his own personal highest being, Pada, the highest expression of Brahman. Atman is a lower expression, it's not Pada. The Atman infuses the world, and the world envelops the Atman. Both of them are pervaded by me, distinct from the Atman and the world. Both are created in me. All right. Such is the case with the Atman. When one realizes that jiva states of consciousness, such as wakefulness, right, the 4 states, wakefulness, dream states, are expressions of Maya, absorbed in the body, absorbed in dream, absorbed in deep sleep. The object of absorption in those cases is Maya. Then one should, when we wake up to that, then we should remain fixed in the knowledge that the seer is transcendent to these states. And therefore grief and desire and anger and all of that. Know me to be that Atman. The Atman is a kind of a spark of God. by dint of whom the Purusha understands the dream to be his when in the state of dreaming. I am Brahman, bliss beyond the gunas. So you sometimes in a dream, you can be aware that you're dreaming. You know you're dreaming in the dream. So in the same way, we can be in this body, in this world, and no, I am not, I'm dreaming. This body and this is not me. That's a nice example. All right. It is due to forgetfulness of this mind nature that samsara exists for a person who thinks of himself as separate from God. It is because of this forgetfulness that a person undergoes body after body and death after death. After having attained a human form where there is the possibility of knowledge and wisdom in the human form, not the other forms, if one doesn't awaken to the Atman in the human form, one doesn't obtain any benefit from being a human. Keeping in mind the hardships accruing from chasing desires in this world, it's so hard to fulfill them and run after them and maintain them. Or of the contrary results that arise from them, right? These desires, they produce contrary results. They don't never turn out like we thought they would. Keeping all that in mind, excuse me a second. Keeping that, a sage should desist from desires. A husband and wife perform actions for the sake of happiness and to avoid unhappiness, but there is neither the cessation of happiness nor the attainment of happiness from this, right? We enter into relationships thinking this will make me happy, but it doesn't. There's a contrary effect. Realizing in this is jnana, my friends. It's not coffee table talk. Realizing in this way the opposite results attained by those people who think themselves clever, right? I'm going to get this desire, that desire. Reasoning, they end up with the opposite results. And realizing the subtle nature of the Atman, which transcends the states of wake, the three states, waking, sleep, and deep sleep, goes back to the Mandukya Upanishad, and freed by one's own willpower. We have willpower and we are agents. It's not impossible. Don't let your mind tell you the story, you can't do this. The sages are different. They're Atmans just like we are. We can do it. And if we don't, suffer. Suffer then. If we want to suffer, we can suffer. So, and freed by one's own willpower from sense objects, whether seen or heard about, Patanjali, drishta drishta, what is vairagya? Vashikara samjna, vairagya, drishta drishta, vishaya, Vaitrishnasya, Vashikara Sabnya, Vairagya, something like that. Right in the beginning, verse 10, 11, whatever. So, where are we? Realizing the subtle nature of the Atman, which transcends it. Now, where are we? My devotee, okay. My devotee, a person should become my bhakta and take satisfaction in knowledge and wisdom and devotion, of course. This is what is to be known as the true self-interest of those who have taken a human birth. There's no other reason for the human birth. And if we use it for anything else, we waste it, and we will get it back, but who knows when? How many trillions of living entities? They're all Atmans. They all entered those other forms because of karma. Well, you think we're any different? Of course we're not. So with the human form is rare according to these wisdom traditions. So why are we wasting it? Chasing desires which simply cause us unhappiness. Perceiving with all one's being the oneness of the Atman with that supreme, and remember this oneness is not the Advaita Vedanta oneness, it's a oneness of between two individuals in relationship and love. This perception, right, this jnana is attained by means of skillful intelligence, that's jnana, and the practice of yoga. By contemplating these words of mine, O king, with faith and without confusion, you will quickly become perfected with knowledge and realization. And then, as King Citraketu had been inspired in this way, was watching, Hari, Bhagavan, who is the guru of the universe, there's your guru. He's the guru of the universe. And if you if you surrender to Ishvara's guru and then you need to meet somebody else, then Ishvara will make that arrangement. I don't care how many times I say that. And soul of everything disappeared from there. Okay, do you want another story, my friends, or do you want to just sort of let that percolate? Because we've got like 10 more minutes, but I don't mind going on for another story. But then we may have questions, and I don't want to disrespect your time. If you want another story, it's a short one, not a lot. That was a long one. Probably made less than 20 verses. So we can go to the core of it. It's kind of a cool story. It's about suppression, how you can't, suppressing samskaras. Who wants a quick story? Hands up. A quick, so it looks like, you can always go if you don't want a story. All right. So, okay.
Do we have a choice with your sincerity?
Well, it's the Bhagavatam that is so nourishing. It's so nourishing.
Let's hear the story.
I tell you, this is the greatest bliss in my life. Okay, I don't know. There's nothing that compares with that. Let's see how many verses, and then we'll decide. Where is it? Citraketu, Edwin Bryant. Right. So Sobari. Whoops. Let's get rid of, what is that? Get rid of that. Can you see the screen? You see it?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just see. 39 to 40. So 39. Okay. 39. So 39 to 55. 20 verses. But we can read it. I'll try not to. I can't help it. I just, but it's a short one. It's just this. So Sage Shobari, right? And he's doing Chitta Vritti Nārada. Remember Patanjali says there's the fourth pranayama. There's inhalation, exhalation, retention. Well, what the heck is the fourth? Well, you stop breathing altogether. So this sage, out of willpower, wants to say, he doesn't want any distraction from his dharana dhyana. He goes underwater. And because he's mastered that fourth type of pranayama, he can survive underwater. And, and in the commentaries of the Patanjali's verse on the fourth type of pranayama, or the absence of any prana ayana, movement of the prana, the commentators talk about, you can be buried alive and under the sand, so no air gets in, and then they can bring you out after. Take it or leave it. But it's kind of like hibernation. I think of it as hibernation of like bears and winter. Maybe not quite the same, but you can actually somehow survive without external air, and the only way I can understand that is you're surviving by the circulation of internal air. But take it or leave it. That's not the point of the story. So he was submerged in the waters of the Yamuna, disciplining himself with severe tapas. There, under the water, desire was kindled in him after he saw the king of fishes happily engaging in sex. Can you see how he's just repressing? He's not the point of this is that he should have been a bhakta. If a bhakta, you absorb your mind in Bhagavan, and that's much more pleasurable. But if you don't, and you're just suppressing all your samskaras, anything can trigger your sex desire. Even two little fishes having sex. Well, what's erotic about that? Nothing, unless you're totally in a state of suppression. Then anything can explode all that huge, warehouse of suppressed desire. So let's see how, I think this has captured your attention now. So this is just as a result, the Brahmana gave up his practice. We start at the end of the story, and then the Brahmana then goes back and shares the story. This Brahmana Sobari. As a result, the Brahmana gave up his practices and then requested the king for one of his maiden daughters, right? He just watching the little fishy have sex, just kindled his sex desire, and he was now he wants to have sex, so he approaches the king. The king replied, "You may take a maiden or Brahmana at her choice." Notice that, by the way. Let the girl has the choice here. It's not arranged. Because the warrior dynasty, there is this choice. There's the 6 kinds of liaisons, and one of them is love. You don't want to know what the other ones are. One is Indo-European kidnapping. One is you don't want to know the other. It's a kind of rather not very nice. But anyway, this is at her choice in a svayam vara, which means that you choose yourself, right? So vara means choice, and svayam means yourself, like svarupa. So the maiden chooses her own husband. Sobari thought to himself, "I'm gray and wrinkled, my head is shakes. I'm in fact being spurned." So he's saying, "I'm being spurned by the king, as I am old and unattractive to women, and so will not be chosen." So he's saying, actually, the king is pretending he is going to give me one of his daughters, but she has to choose, and I'm so ugly, none of them's going to choose me. So he thinks I'm politely being spurned. So the yoga master resolved, "I shall perfect my body such that it becomes desirable even to celestial women." So he does have this tapas, and he can shapeshift, which a recent movie called it. So he can, has siddhis, he has powers. So my body will become desirable even to celestial women, not to mention mortal princesses. After doing this, the sage was then admitted by the guard into the opulent inner quarter of the palace reserved for maidens. So now he's a nice, handsome sage and very desirable, and he goes into the inner quarter, right? The guards, of where the princesses are. There, although he was a sole suitor, Sobari was selected as a husband by all 50 princesses. He really did a number on himself. Yeah, he went to Brazil and had plastic surgery, or some such the city equivalent of that. Okay. The point of the story, though, is that let's see. I think he's going to discuss his fate in a minute. So now he's got 50 basically sexual partners. That's really what he's interested in, right? Doesn't want to be a king or rule the kingdom. Because their minds had all become drawn to him, right? It's going to end badly. Great dissent broke out between the maidens, and their affection for each other was broken. This man is fit for me, not you, they all said. Sobari was well versed in the Rig Veda, and thus skilled in mantra incantations. He enjoyed with those princesses without interruption, and so he could create these celestial palaces by his mystic power. But of course, he's going to lose it all by using it in this way. He enjoyed with them without interruption in palaces furnished with the most exquisite and priceless opulence by his austerities. And that footnote probably mentions about how great yogis can do all this. They were filled with costly, right? All these palaces, right? Costly garlands, foodstuffs, oil, all. Now he's become a total sense indulger. Ointments, right? Smells, foodstuffs, bathing places, ornaments, garments, sitting places, beds. They were tended by beautifully adorned male and female attendants, fragrant groves, streams that are sort of paradisial. Bees, birds. In fact, the ruler of the 7 continents, Mandata, who as the story comes elsewhere, was so astounded at seeing Sobari situated in his household of life that he gave up the pride that accompanied his own universal opulence. Okay, let's get to the point. But here's the point. There's the jnana. Absorbed in sense gratification in his palaces and stimulated by varieties of pleasure at everything, Sobari was still not satisfied. You can never be satisfied by sex, my friends, or lust, or by any of the essential indulgences. Pay attention to your own lives and experiences. Tell me this is not so. Still not satisfied, just as fire is not extinguished by drops of ghee. You put ghee on a fire, it just makes it burn more. Ghee, right? Butter, like throwing, oil. So one day, that great master of the Rig Veda, Sobari, the great yogi, while sitting down, realized his compromised condition, caused by his own self, which had all come about because of the mating of fish. And the commentators take this to be, if you don't fix the mind on Bhagavan and you're just doing it by willpower, you might attain amazing heights. But in Vachaspati Mishra, the commentator says, just like the frogs come out in the rainy season and start croaking, those desires eventually will manifest and pull you out of your samadhi state without the blessings of Bhagavan. Only by fixing the mind of Bhagavan. That's the Bhakta position. The Jnana traditions would not say that. They would say you can attain enlightenment by a course, but Bhakti wouldn't. Oh ho, just look at my downfall. Me, an ascetic performer of austerities, was the great Tapasvin, who had taken a vow of acting in truth. My absorption in Brahman, his own Atman, cultivated, there's no Bhakti here, notice, cultivated for such a long time, was derailed because of the mating of fish. How unerotic and just minimalistic is that? But it's enough to trigger your suppressed ragas, my friends. One desires of liberation must renounce all association with those who are dedicated to sex. If you don't, then your mind will be pulled towards it. Even just, that's just a fact. And if you allow your mind to linger, even on innocuous things like a sexy advertisement in a newspaper or some racy whatever, your mind just becomes absorbed and your own ragas get stimulated. You have to be very strict if you want to be brahmachari. Look at me. One desires of liberation, right? With all one's heart and soul, one must not let the senses flow outwardly. If you're doing Patanjali yoga, right? This is not the karma yoga or bhakti yoga. Patanjali yoga. pratyahara. You cannot let the senses flow outwardly, therefore living alone in a secluded place. I mean, he went to a secluded place under the water. He took it really seriously. Or perhaps in the company of sadhus who have taken the same vows. That's fair enough. One should engage one's mind. Oh, he does say on the unlimited Lord. He didn't, though. I was a lone ascetic performing tapas underwater, but because of associating with fish, I've become 50, right? Yeah, now he's got 50 wives, as it were, without even mentioning my 500 offspring. Now he has 100 kids, 10 kids at each one. I can find no satisfaction for my desires for this world or the next. They demand never-ending indulgence. This is what it's communicating. My mind has been overwhelmed by the gunas of Maya, and my consciousness has sense objects as its goal. Living in this way in his household for some time, Sobari eventually became averse to it. If we do our practices, my friends, eventually we become averse to the pursuit of desire. That's the result of practice, and we can test our own progress by seeing how free we are becoming from desire. Simple as that. So once he had become fixed in renunciation, he eventually went to the forest. His wives followed him, considering their husband to be their lord. There, with controlled mind, Sobari performed intense austerities. It is through these that the Atman is revealed. Then, along with the sacred fires, he joined his Atman with the supreme Atman. The wives, seeing that their husband had attained the supreme destination, followed him by dint of his potency, just as flames become extinguished when a fire has become extinguished. So they followed him. Now, did they enter the fire? It doesn't say. They could have done, because they are princesses. And okay. So let me just run to the bathroom, and we'll take questions, my friends. And I'm going to throw a log in the fire. So give me 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. So if anybody has anything they want to say or share, or any questions, and we have one more session, my friends, and then we will do the grand finale, which is Krishna Lila, which is where it all ends for bhaktas. And I'd actually really love to contemplate an ongoing future where we read from the Bhagavatam regularly. I don't know about once a week, but maybe once a month, or whatever. If you do something too regularly, people will lose interest in it, or take it for granted. But maybe I'm open to doing Vedanta Sutra next year. And we're doing it now this semester, and I'm paying attention to verses that could be, but it's a little bit dry, and it doesn't have any of the richness of the Bhagavatam, but nonetheless, it's a text that one should know something about just in one svadhyaya. But I'd love to come up. I would love to be able to read Bhagavatam once a month or twice a month. Every week, but I think that would become too much of that might become too, just take it sort of, I don't know, but I'd like to do in some sort of regular way. So if that's something of interest to you, let me know, to send me an email. But anyway, so questions on this week's reading. Yes, Andrea. Oh, sorry, we said Carl was going to go first. Carl, do you mind? Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Hi.
Hi again.
Hi again. Thank you so much for all of this. And because I may not send an email, absolutely, I'll be there whenever I can. And I do hope that you continue with this. I can't express what it's meant to me. In the reading today, and when I hear about sense desires, blah, 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 it's so much generally just sort of lumped in with sexual desires. But one of the things that confuses me when I'm spending time in spiritual communities, sometimes it's like an attitude around the arts, and maybe how much is art sensual desire? Like, am I supposed, I just wonder if you could speak to that. I can't fully articulate as usual, but.
Sure. Well, in the bhakti traditions, then art is bhakti if it's offered to Bhagavan. So if the art is, for the pleasure of Bhagavan, so somehow Bhagavan is depicted in the art. So most Indian art in the pre-modern era was with paintings of Shiva and Vishnu and Krishna and the Leelas and the activities. If you go to the museums and look at their pre-modern collections of art, and even today modern Indian art, you'll find some deity and some so art becomes bhakti when, same as music and dance does. Think of Indian dance. It's really depictions of the different stories and activities. So that would be then, that art would then be bhakti. But if it's not, if it's just about some beautiful picturesque prakriti sunset, then it might be sattvic, but it wouldn't be yoga, unless it would be yoga only if it's somehow you find a way of connecting it to Atman or Bhagavan. So most gyanis actually and yogis would renounce art completely, as they would renounce all sense indulgence whatsoever. But bhakti takes all of the art forms and Bhagavanizes it. So therefore Indian drama is, Indian, and you go to any Bharatanatyam dance, it's going to be a depiction of some Leela, some pastime of Krishna or Rama and so forth. And literature and poetry, most pre-modern poetry is all devotional. So bhakti, whereas bhakti absorbs the arts and transmogrifies them into offerings and depictions and channels for channeling Bhagavan. The Jnana Yoga traditions would be more austere and more renounced. So bhakti, art can find a place in bhakti, but provided Bhagavan is central in the art, is somehow either depicted in it, or somehow the art is leading one to Bhagavan. Yeah. Okay. Carl, we promised Carl that, I'm sorry, apologies to Carl.
Thank you, and that's fine. You can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. Well,
so just hang on a second, Carl. So like behind you, right, on your right shoulder.
Yeah.
You see that's art. See that looks like a picture of whoever it might be, right?
It's actually Ganesh. It's a beads in a doorway.
Yes. Oh, look at that, beads with Ganesh on it.
Yeah,
I got that from an Indian man in an Indian store.
he said it was like $50. He said, but you can have it for 10 because it's missing one. I said 10. He said, oh yeah, take it. So it was meant to be 30 years ago.
You got to dig it, deal. Do you mind if I just show Andrea? So a couple of things. I'll just replace. I don't know how I replace the.
It was missing like one little thing. He said, "Okay, give me $10." He was so unattached. He runs an Indian supply bookstore, incense in Providence.
How lovely! But now, and can you see that?
Oh yeah, that's Krishna.
Radha Krishna. You see how beautiful it is?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the frame.
You didn't pay $10 for that.
No, well, it's at Vrindavan. Look at all the jewels in the painting.
That's beautiful.
So this is so these deities are made in Jaipur from marble. Look how beautiful that is.
Ah, yes.
And look,
I've been in your puja room, by the way.
Yeah, no, and this is for Andrea, and I just want to follow up on that conversation.
I'm sorry.
Let me just give examples. So this is a different kind of style, Radha Krishna. And then again, we have, so let me just show you. So this is Orion. Look how beautiful that is. That's silk. It's kind of like a mandala, and the outside of the Vishnu avatars, and you get into then there's Krishna Leela, and then in the innermost core, there's Krishna with the gopis. So this is what I mean by bhaktiizing art. So this is really mostly pre-modern Indian aesthetics. That's a deity from Vrindavan. I mean, there's some secular stuff as well, right? That's a king, but so there are obviously, but anyway, so that's just following up on the point with Andrea. Okay, Carl, yes.
Oh, good, because I'm going to indirectly get the sex question in a minute. So we'll get the art. I'm going to throw a sex question in there. But before I get there, may I just say two things very briefly about myself?
Yes.
I've been working my buns off for the past 50 years, paying the rent.
Yes.
And at the same time, I've been blessed to have been close to Peter Brooks's Mahabharata play. That's that 9-hour play. I've been blessed to find Hari Harananda, the translation by Mukherjee, 1963.
Great.
And also Winthrop Sargent's Bhagavad Gita. So while I've been working to pay the rent, there's been time to be with all these books to try the Patanjali meditation. All right.
Yeah.
The second thing is that I've experienced in the last few months the death of my year-older brother. He's 73. I died suddenly of stroke. And a month after that, my best female friend for 21 years straight died of starvation because of her intestines just shut down. So I'm in the middle of grief, and I hear the Bhagavad Gita say, you grieve for those for whom there should be no grief, yet speakers do the wise, blah, blah, blah. You're working on the translation, God bless you. My blessing is not only to find your 2 translations so far, but to actually have this stuff. I call it satsang, or wow. As long as you're alive, dude, I'm going to be here on Zoom because this is amazing.
Well, yes.
I've had the books, I've had the movies, and I finally starting to understand Hari Harananda's translation, thanks to you. So, given all that, in terms of desire, it seems like the bhakti that you're so close to, I don't know it's for me, and you never said it has to be for me, but I see from the Bhagavad Gita, it's more like a karma yoga. It's like, it's okay to have desire. It's okay to have sex. It's okay to have art. It's okay to have deep affections for my brother, my lover, your daughter, Mohini, your sister, Pia, my sister, twin sister's dying. My twin sister's dying. Okay. It's okay. My idea for karma yoga, Professor, it's my idea. Don't attach yourself, if you can figure it out somehow, to the fruit of the action. By all means, Arjuna, established in yoga, act. I hear Krishna saying, Carl, established in yoga, do your art, do your sex, do your love, do your desires, but established in yoga.
Yes, but Carl, established in yoga means to be free of personal desire.
Well,
That's what it means. Yeah, the karma yoga means, otherwise it's karma. What's the difference between karma and karma yoga is karma is we act with desire, and karma yoga is we do the same action, but without desire for personal body-mind return.
But you
So
do
therefore-
engage in quote unquote then the shell of the action.
Yes, and you do, you love your children, but you're not expecting anything back. You love your brother, you're not expecting anything back. You're doing this pure selflessly. And, I don't know what to say about grief. Naturally, it's, if we're on a very, very high level of jnana, the text will tell us we don't grieve. And this is what the story we just read, because we understand that what I thought of as my brother was really just a soul that, like the two grains of sand that come together for a moment in the ocean and get thrust apart. So we had this wonderful time together. We had that, but now he's gone wherever he's going to go. I'm going to go wherever I'm going to go. And if one thinks that way, that the brother isn't dead, but has gone to his next destination, and as you will, the more we think about the situation through the lens of jnana, the less that grief will trouble us. There'll still be sadness. There'll be, obviously miss the brother, but that pain will lessen.
Thank you. Your bhakti yoga comes across more to me like a complete renunciate, and I'm thinking, from what I get out of the Bhagavad Gita, there is sort of a quote unquote middle way. You don't give up the truth of who we are, but you don't try to, maybe I don't call, like you said, willpower doesn't work. The fish in the water, so you're gonna have sexual desire. So unless you're deeply in love with your Bhagavan, it's not like you're condemned to be in total ignorance. It seems like there's a middle way of being engaged and yet not being attached.
Well,
that's what I've got to say. That's it.
Okay. Well, Carl, if we're not attached, it means we don't have any personal desire. Now, the middle way in the Indic tradition is dharma. The dharma is the middle way where if you do have desires, right? Because yoga, we have to be clear, yoga means to be free of all desire. We can't change the way the yoga is presented in the Bhagavad Gita. When you fixed in jnana, act, Arjuna, fixed in knowledge, act. What is that knowledge? I am Atman. So if I'm Atman, what am I not? I'm not this body mind. So what else are you not? We can look at, I had a student do an MA thesis on the Bhagavad Gita, 175 verses. A fifth of the text is about give up desire, give up desire. One can't miss that message. Now, the middle way is, okay, I can't, I have these desires, and the middle way is, then let me channel my desires in a dharmic way. And but understanding that ultimately at some point I have to get, if I want to be a yogi, if I want to call myself a yoga, if I want to aspire for the goals of yoga, at some point in this life or the next, can't change what yoga is. Yoga is eventually to be completely free of desires. But if we're not ready for that, then we act dharmically in the world. Then we keep our yogic practices on the side. We love our relatives, we love our friends. We perform our function in the world dharmically, keeping the practices going. And if we do the practices, the mind becomes free of desire. That's what it means to be purified. It means to give up, to become free of the desires. And we can notice that as we go along, that things that were intensely important to us at earlier phase of life become silly illusions as the mind becomes purified. But we can't change what yoga is. And the Gita especially, right at the beginning, free of desire. Read, Carl, after we finish, go to the end of chapter 2, Winthrop Sargent, around about verse 50, somewhere there. Arjuna says, who is the Stitadhi? Who is the one who has fixed mind? Who is the sage? He calls it Stitadhi, around about middle 50s. And then Krishna gives him 20-verse answer, every single verse, when he's describing who is the sage, free of a desire, free of attachment for all sides. Read that carefully with this lens only. Don't forget about any other teaching. Just focus, just look for the word desire, attachment, and synonyms, and pay attention to that, and then we'll talk some more. Thank you, Carl. Sempre un piacere, huh? Okay. Andrea, Happy Jack's turn. We're
Okay.
out.
Namaste. Thank you so much. Great questions.
Happy Jack, let's talk a little bit after everybody leaves, okay? Because I want to follow up on that discussion. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you want me to ask my question now, or do it?
Of course. No, you ask your question, of course, yeah.
Okay, I guess I was curious, Professor Bryant. As you know, we joke in the yoga world, with the hippy dippy yogis. The good thing is that people are very accepting, right, of the path. And I do notice that in academe, of course, the majority, 99%, are very accepting, very beautiful. And there are some people who have some judgments and have some strong opinions. And I've noticed, and not teachers, I'm not talking professors, but students, and they're half my age.
Opinions about what? What do you, can you give
Yeah,
us?
so around being a white man who's one, teaching yoga, so there's the culturally appropriating yoga, but even more so studying Hinduism and believing Hinduism and all of this, and contemplate not becoming Hindu per se, but just in some way appropriating that. And so
Yeah.
the individual I'm thinking of, he's an Asian man who's a Buddhist. He's 22 years old or something, and he has these very strong opinions. And so, it doesn't bother me. I know who I am, but I guess I'm just curious for you. Did you come across this in academia or other circles where people have these strong opinions about you?
Well,
Yeah.
I find, I understand to a certain extent, if things are, disrespectfully appropriated and misused and misplaced, I can understand that. But I mean, religion is always cross-fertilized. If we're going to go down that route, then what? Then no, Indians shouldn't be wearing trousers and shirts? Why are they appropriating, Western culture then? Why are they, doing all the? Are we going to go down that? What, all Italians have to wear togas now all of a sudden, and all Anglo-Saxons have to wear leggings with. I mean, it gets very silly. So for me, the issue is, yoga itself has evolved over the years, and the very first teaching of yoga is you're not the body, you're not the culture, you're not the country, you're not this and that. So to try to sort of trap yoga into a specific culture or a specific geographical area, right there is a misunderstanding of what yoga is. Yoga is supposed to take us beyond all of those identifications. So so those are the two things I say, that yoga is transnational, it's transgender, it's trans-bodily, it's number one. Number two, the Bhagavatam itself says that bhakti, you take the verse from the Bhagavatam, that bhakti can be attained by the Huns, by the Chinese, it mentions them, by the Kalindas. It has this big list of other non-Indian nations that were known to that ancient, all of these can become great Bhagavata. So the texts themselves present themselves as being transnational. Clearly, if they're taking us to the Atman, then it has to be something transnational. So those are the two. I would say, I would put it that way. That first of all, the basic 101, the first day in yoga school, in kindergarten yoga school, the first lesson 101, you are not the body, you are not the culture, you are not the country, you transcend all of that. So to try to tie that knowledge is the opposite of yoga, number one. Number two, if we go down that route, then and Westerners are not supposed to appropriate yoga, Indian yoga, well, then Indians shouldn't be appropriating Western culture either. Then it plays both ways. I mean, I say that not as a serious argument, but as reductio ad absurdum. It's called tarka in logic. Reductio ad absurdum, where you show that an opinion is incoherent. Does that mean everybody should then only follow? And number one, and number two, it's not like there's been some pristine yoga preserved immaculately. That yoga itself is morphed. Gujarati, bhakti, for example, is different from Aryan bhakti, is different from South Indian bhakti. So even within a so-called India, there are all these flavors. So naturally, it's going to take flavors outside of India. So I think, where we can agree with that kind of post-colonial, politically correct, those sensitivities, is that one should be very respectful and not take, the deities and take them out of their devotional context and put them into contexts that are inappropriate devotionally. That I fully support. That we can all agree upon it. There should be no disrespect offered But if someone is sincerely, where on earth, ask the person, where on earth does it say that bhakti is only for Indians? Find one verse that says it. On the contrary, we can find verses that say the precise opposite. So you can throw the ball in their court. Where does it say that if someone is sincere, not disrespectfully, but sincerely practicing, Atma Jnana Yoga or Patanjali Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, where does it say that's only for Hindu? What does that mean, Hindus anyway? That term doesn't even exist in the Sanskrit text. So there's various ways of responding, but I wouldn't respond, aggressively. I would just kind of, just gently, make some of these points but agree with the person, so the person doesn't feel their opinion has been slighted. Agree that definitely there should be no, disrespect. There should not be any appropriation in any way that might cause offense to a devotee, specifically devotee. Now, the commercialization of high street, maybe this is what the person's talking about. The commodification, consumerization, and turning, yoga into a postural exhibition of poses on the high street. You know what? You can agree with that and say, yeah, well, that's what happens when yoga comes to the West and hits the biggest capitalist, fueled economy in the world. That's what happens, and you can agree with that. You can give him that one. Absolutely, that's yours. Yeah, we agree.
Yeah,
No question about it. But if the person is saying that someone sincerely seeking truth is not allowed to undertake the practice of yoga or engage in the worship of Bhagavan, you say, where the heck does it say that in the millions of Sanskrit verses that we have at our disposal? But I've been a little bit, a little polemical in the way I framed that. But be kind and gentle, because ultimately the person's probably well-meaning and probably a little bit distraught by. It probably boils down to the commodification of these traditions, and we can accept that. We can agree with that.
awesome. Thank you very much.
Jack. Any other questions or comments, my friends? So if not, we will see you for our final session and next week. And I bid you good night. So Happy Jack, do you want to hang for a few minutes, or do you want another time?
That's great.
So
Yeah, thanks.
everybody, I bid you good night. I'm going to hit the stop recording button here.